Hi, it's Miss Amanda from the Allen County Public Library, and welcome to another summer reading program. Today we're talking about magical creatures, beasts, and mermaids. Have you been able to guess what kind of books we might read today, if they're about beasts or mermaids? Well, let's get started. We're going to be talking about monsters, which is what Mary Shelley created, our one and only Frankenstein. And through the years, we have been able to see how Frankenstein has played a role in different forms of literature and movie and entertainment purposes. Sometimes he is perceived as being very scary, but other times he is perceived as being misunderstood. And we're going to see if we can figure out our own assumptions on the monster Frankenstein. We're also going to talk about mermaids, and our most popular mermaid that we are familiar with is the Little Mermaid from the Disney classic, The Little Mermaid, Ariel. Now, not all mermaids, though, have that magical feel of just being very sweet and kind. They have a darker side. So we're going to touch base on a few of those things today and see if we can relate to the nice side of things or the darker side. Either way is fun. So stay tuned for a little research on monsters and mermaids. Hi, so the first magical creature we're going to talk about today is the monster. And in all kinds of stories throughout history and even in television and different forms of entertainment, you're going to see monsters as the main character. You can think of different beasts and things and all different kinds of things. And what stands out to me most of all is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and Frankenstein was the doctor who created the monster, and so that's what we're going to focus our attention on today. But it doesn't mean that that's the only monster out there. There's so many different things that you can read about in folklore and different forms of fairy tales, but today we will focus on the monster. Let's learn about these monsters real fast. So it's one of those things you need to ask yourself: why do I always want to watch things or read things about monsters? Why does that appeal to us so much? Well, monsters appear not only because they are grotesquely inhuman, but because they are altogether human, meaning they have a lot of similarities to us, and that's why we can relate to them more. They embody these qualities that we recognize in ourselves, but sometimes we would rather just not think about them and disown them altogether. So the monster in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, he is so hideous, he's so ugly, he's shunned by everyone he meets. Even his own creator starts to be really scared of him. So even though he's pleading for them just to please, like, accept him and love him as he is, everybody ends up turning their backs towards him, and they try to come after him and do away with him, even when he didn't even ask to be here in the first place. So I think Miss Amanda really likes the monster so much is because she can relate to not being accepted all the time and feeling sorry for others. And that's why we're talking about the monster today. I hope you enjoy this book, this read aloud that I'm reading to you next. It's called She Made a Monster, How Mary Shelley Created Frankenstein. And I think you're really going to enjoy this. And after the story, you'll see a fun craft that you can do at home with your family. She Made a Monster, How Mary Shelley Created Frankenstein by Lynn Fulton, illustrated by Felicia Sala. We would like to thank Alfred A. Knopf of New York Publishers for allowing us to read this to you virtually today. What would Mary's imagination create? "200 years ago, on a wild, stormy night, in a beautiful house on the shores of Lake Geneva in Switzerland, a young woman named Mary sat at her dressing table. She and her friends were staying in the house for the season, visiting Lord Byron, the famous English poet. Mary could hear the others still talking downstairs while she brushed her hair by candlelight, thinking of stories. Stories she'd read, stories she'd heard, stories she wanted to tell. For Mary wanted to become a writer. Her dear friend Percy Shelley, who would soon be her husband, was a poet, and Mary herself came from a family of writers. All around her, she felt the power of words, and she hoped that someday she too would write something important, something that would hit the world like a bolt of lightning splitting the night sky. But for now, she only wanted to write a ghost story. It had all begun when the friends had read aloud from a book of frightening tales, entertaining each other through the rainy days and nights. Lord Byron had declared, "We should each write a ghost story. In a week we will see who has written the best one." The week would be up tomorrow. The men had already finished their stories, tales of bloodthirsty vampires and vengeful ghosts. Of course, Byron is sure the best one will be his, Mary thought now. He is an excellent poet after all, but so arrogant. Yet try as she might, Mary had found no way to begin her story. The clock struck midnight. Mary put down her hairbrush and tiptoed into the hall. Over the howling wind, she could hear her friends talking about the latest scientific experiments, their favorite topic. Percy's voice thundered up the stairs. "Electricity," he was saying. "Galvani used it to make a dead frog kick its legs." Dashing back to her room, Mary felt a shiver creep over her. She remembered hearing as a young girl about an even more ghastly experiment. A scientist made a corpse move using electricity. Mary had shuddered as she listened, clinging to her father's leg. She had only been 6 years old. To erase that terrible image from her mind, Mary opened her locket and looked at the tiny portrait of her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft. She died when Mary was a baby. As a girl, Mary learned the alphabet by tracing the letters on her mother's tombstone. When she was older, she read everything her mother had written, stirring words about democracy and the rights of women, words that sparked courage and inspiration in many, but anger and outrage in many others. Women the equals of men? What a monstrous thought, people had said about her mother's idea. And for Mary Wollstonecraft to write them was even more monstrous. Women were not supposed to have ideas of their own, let alone publish them. Now, Mary snapped her locket shut. She wanted to prove that her mother was right. A woman's writing could be just as important as a man's. Downstairs, the men's voices grew louder and more excited. To give life to lifeless matter will be the ultimate triumph. Man will conquer nature and make her give up the secret. Mary shook her head as she listened. Nature might have very good reasons for keeping her secret, she thought. Besides, what would happen to that lifeless matter once someone had given it life? The men did not seem to care. They only asked if something could be done, not if it should. Thunder rumbled in the distance and the rain beat harder against the window. Mary watched the wax drip down her candle. Now she could hear the others saying good night and stepping softly up the stairs. She thought of ghosts and vampires. She thought of monsters. She thought of loneliness. The night was passing and still she didn't have a story. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, and Mary jumped as her reflection peered back to her from the mirror, pale and strange, like something dead restored to life. Wouldn't it be terrifying to see such a creature? She mused. Or perhaps more terrifying to be such a creature. Mary got into bed and stared up into the darkness. The house by the lake was still. The wind shrieked over the eaves, but only Mary was awake to hear it. She let the booming thunder fill her head. She closed her eyes to the burst of lightning, but she did not sleep. Instead, as if in a dream, she saw a huge form lying on a table. It was a man, yet not a man. It had a hideous, scarred face. She saw a young student anxiously bending over the form with a candle. He had achieved his ambition. He had discovered nature's secret and given life to the creature on the table. But now he was afraid. He did not know what to do. He dropped the candle, covered his face with his hands, and ran away, hoping the ember of life he had sparked would die out. And suddenly, lying in her bed with the curtains shut, Mary felt as if she was the young creator. She felt as if she'd run to her room to cower under the sheets, trying not to think of the terrible thing she'd created, trying not to think of it coming to find her. She trembled as she imagined a hand, huge, gray, and twisted, appearing through the bed curtains. She saw the curtains part. The creature stared down at her with bulging yellow eyes. What did it want from her? Mary gasped and sat up in bed. She ripped open the curtains and recognized her own room in the moonlight. All was familiar and ordinary. There was no monster. There was only her imagination. Her heart pounded, but she was happy. She had found her story. The end. Miss Amanda explains how she created her own monster, and you can too. So this is a fun craft that you can do that represents Mary Shelley's monster Frankenstein. And all I did was I had some black construction paper, and it was a solid piece that I added a green template down on top of. It's got the black spiky hair on top. I've overlapped some different colors of green so it gives it a little bit of contrast, and that kind of mixes up the different scarring on the face that made the monster so hideous to look at and scary. The monster is known for having all of these stitches across its face. So I've got markers that I have used to represent the stitches. I've got his mouth kind of stitched closed. And he's also known for having bolts coming out of his ears or his neck. And that's what I've made for his ears. For a complete rundown on the directions on how to make this, you can find that in the comments below. And if you need materials to supply this, you can come to the library, pick up a brown bag, and it will have all the materials from today's program in there. So the monster. Hi, the next tale we're going to tell about is The Little Mermaid, and it's personally one of Miss Amanda's favorite Disney movies. I love the character of Ariel. She is a mermaid who lives in the sea with all of her sisters, and King Triton is her father. But the original tale that was written by Hans Christian Andersen is a lot darker, and Disney has the tendency not to include all those darker elements, and for good reason. I'm going to share just a little bit, just the skim of the surface of what the original tale is about. If parents want to introduce their children to the darker side of things, I will include the original version down in the comment section below, but do not feel obligated to. It's completely up to the parents' discretion on that. So one of the darkest fairy tales out there is, in fact, The Little Mermaid. It includes all kinds of dark elements that I'm not really going to get into because I want to leave that up to the parents. This tale was written in 1837 by Hans Christian Andersen, and it follows the story of a 14-year-old mermaid. In the movie, she's known as Ariel, but it has the same plot twist in the book version and the theatrical version. She's trying to find her true love. Now, the mermaid shuns her life in the sea in search of a prince who is on the land. Now, as we know, mermaids are not land dwellers. They live in the seas, and part of her predicament is she cannot get to the one that she loves because he is a man. He does not have a fin, he has two legs. So in order for her to be able to find her one true love, she is making a deal with the sea urchin. And in the movie, her name is Ursula. In the book by Hans Christian Andersen, they just call her the Sea Witch. So the Sea Witch, in order to help her gain this love of hers, she strikes a deal, and she tells her, I will take your tongue and your voice in exchange for legs. So if you will let me have your tongue and your voice, I will give you legs so that you can dwell on the land to find your prince. and the mermaid takes her up on that deal. Now, the same is true in the Disney version. She takes her voice. There's that really big dramatic scene where Ursula is like, you know, telling her, sing to me, and she's singing, and the louder she sings, her voice protrudes, and she captures her voice. And once she has her voice, she does grow those legs. The Sea Queen, or the Sea Witch, puts her on to the shores of the ocean where her prince finds her. It's her goal to make him fall in love with her, and in the movie it happens, but in Hans Christian Andersen's story it doesn't. Actually, the opposite happens. The worst of the worst happens to the Little Mermaid. And if you want to find out what really happens, again, you can find out in the link below. But it is dark, parents. Make sure to preview that with your spouses and stuff, just to make sure that it's appropriate for your children to know. So just know that all of these Disney adaptations come from something prior. There is a story that was told long ago, and The Little Mermaid is one of those. Miss Mariah has a really fun craft to show you, and I hope that you enjoy making a mermaid tale with her today. The darkest fairy tales that's out there. It features murder and suicide, and it's really scary. But it came from an author, Hans Christian Andersen, in 1837. So it's been around for a really long time. And it's a story that follows a 14-year-old mythical creature who was a mermaid. And it's her quest on how to find her one true love. The mermaid is shunned all of her life by the sea prince. And in the Disney version, we know that as King Triton. The plot line with the story goes with the movie pretty well until certain parts, and they cut things out and add their own spin on things. The Little Mermaid, Ariel, she's tortured by the Sea Witch. So in the movie, who is the Sea Witch? Do you remember? Ursula, that's right. And Ursula takes her voice and her tongue away in exchange for legs. Because she's a mermaid, she can't live out of the sea. But it's her dream and her desire to try to find her one true love. And she has found Prince Eric. And he is a human who lives on the land. And she's trying to make her way to Eric. But she can't do that with her mermaid fin. So in exchange for her voice and her tongue, she gets rid of that, and the sea urchin gives her her legs, so that she can go on to the land to find Eric. Now in the movie, we don't see Ariel as having a hard time walking. There may be a couple of instances when she first comes to shore that she's stumbling a little bit because she's not used to walking. But in the story by Hans Christian Andersen, the way that they portray her new legs is that she is able to walk on land, but every single step that she takes, it's resembling somebody is being pricked by sharp knives. So it's not a pleasant experience at all. The character in the book doesn't have a soul per se, but the only way that she'll be able to survive is to win Prince Eric's affection. Now, unlike the Walt Disney adaptation, the Little Mermaid in our story, our book story, she fails to complete the mission of marrying Prince Eric. So in the movie, all is well. She marries Prince Eric, she gets her voice back, the sea urchin is gone, but in the original tale, that doesn't happen. And I'm not going to go into the details of what happens afterwards. Just know that the prince marries another woman, and she is succumbed to having to be the bridesmaid per se, having to hold up the dress for this new woman. And eventually, because of the deep sadness, she herself becomes nothing but sea foam. So now, after looking at this original tale, it's no surprise that Disney did have to make special adaptations in order to please family audiences. And I think it's a good thing that they did. I love the original tales. They are darker, they are twisted, but for our young minds, I think it is really good just to stimulate happiness and positivity. And that's what Disney, I think, tries to do in all those movies that we get to see. So make sure, if you want to check out the original version of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen, there is a link in the comment section below. And we're going to show off a really fun craft that Miss Mariah has put together for you that resembles the mermaid's tail. Make a mermaid's tail with Miss Mariah. All you'll need is aluminum foil, scissors, glue, and extra materials like glitter and pieces of paper. Enjoy! On this mermaid's tail, Miss Mariah simply used permanent markers. On this one, she used glue and then added glitter on top. And this one is just paper confetti. There's so much you can do with your mermaid tail. I hope you enjoyed today's program, Magical Creatures, Beasts, and Mermaids. We focused on the monster and the mermaid today, and I hope you enjoyed the darker side of things. If you need a monster kit, we've got those here at the library to pick up if you need some paper. It includes a visual of today's craft, and you get 3 different kinds of paper that will help you complete your monster. I'm not going to include instructions. I want to see what you can do on your own, but this visual should be an indicator on what you need, on how to complete that. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. Send me an email, amanda@allencountylibrary.com. You can send us a direct message through Facebook, and that's at ACPUBLIB. Again, thanks for coming today, and we will see you next week for another fun summer reading program. Bye!